Good afternoon. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is our first quarterly cyber threat update, and it's an opportunity for us to provide some quick insights into emerging and evolving threats in the cybersecurity landscape. I am Kaylee Alessandro. I'm the Director of Marketing for Omega Systems. For anyone who is joining us for the first time, Omega is an MSP and MSSP serving a variety of industries, particularly those who are highly regulated and, of course, security conscious. I want to welcome my colleague, Rick Mutzel, who's joining us today. Hi, Rick. How are you? You're muted in case you wanted to say hello to everyone. There we go. Rick
Hello.
is our security and compliance officer and is at the forefront of both our corporate and customer-facing security practices. So Rick, for anyone who has not had the pleasure of hearing you speak before, do you want to just share a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I've been with Omega for 10 years. I manage our security operations center, and I am our corporate compliance officer as well.
Plenty on your plate, so we appreciate you taking the time to give us a little bit of a briefing today. As I said, our intention today is to provide a brief update on the threat landscape, some of the trends we're seeing, so that you and your businesses can be a little bit more informed than you were yesterday on what's happening and how you can take action against some of these permeating threats and concerns. So we do plan to keep this brief, hopefully 15 or 20 minutes. If we're able to, we will save a little bit of time at the end for questions. So if you do have a question during the course of the presentation, you can type it into the questions box that's right on your GoToWebinar dashboard, and we'll do our best to get to those if we have time. As always, we are recording today's presentation, so you can revisit this content later, share it with others, and both the recording and presentation slides will be delivered to your inbox approximately 24 hours from now. So keep an eye out tomorrow afternoon for that. So let's dive right in here. The first topic we want to cover today is phishing, and I want to start by sharing some interesting statistics from Barracuda's latest spear phishing trends report, which was just released a couple of weeks ago. So I'll kind of share these with you, and then Rick can pontificate. 50% of organizations were victims of spear phishing in the last 12 months. An average of 10 suspicious emails are reported to an organization's IT department on a regular workday. And a typical organization receives 5 highly personalized spear phishing emails a day. So Rick, in your experience, are these numbers overinflated, underinflated, or right on target?
I'd say they're pretty well on target, although the 10 suspicious emails, I question that one. It seems a little low based on ticket counts that we get into the SOC. For our average customer, I'd say we're averaging more on the 15 to 20. Again, depending on the size of the organization, much larger organizations, larger surface, more users, we get more reports of suspicious emails.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I would agree with you that 10 is probably a little bit low. So I wanted to share on this next slide, this screenshot on the right here. Last week, as I was preparing for this presentation, I happened to get this phishing notification email in my inbox. It's as if the hackers knew that I needed some good content for this webinar. So in all seriousness, this is exactly the kind of email that we're seeing trip users up. You know, in my case at Omega, we have preventative measures in place. So I never even saw the original phishing email come through. I only received the phishing alert. But I know a lot of businesses, unfortunately, don't have these types of tools in place to catch, you know, different scams, CEO frauds, brand impersonation emails that we're seeing, and unfortunately then have to rely, you know, 100% on their users being diligent in catching these threats. So Rick, in terms of the social engineering and the phishing trends you're seeing, these 3 types primarily seem to be the most prevalent and the most successful. What are you seeing lately are the techniques that are tripping users up the most?
The spoofing is one. People are starting to get kind of wise to the spoofing. The brand impersonation I think is the top kind of get you. for most users. They're really, really good. Um, Most common, your online services, so like an Office 365 login, Google, LinkedIn, any of the major carriers that you're authenticating to. They're impersonating, redirecting, intercepting, and capturing credentials for those logins, and they're very, very convincing. So I see that as the major kind of trend as far as what types of email kind of phishing and impersonation are going on. And then, the CEO or another user kind of that call to attention, I need you to do something, and they're spoofing the name and kind of, intercepting the message correspondence back and forth as a second. The traditional kind of spam that you normally get, it's prevalent, it's going to be there, but the heavy hitters are definitely the brand impersonation.
And they're sort of these haven't really changed recently. It seems like these, because they're working, these same threats are continually bypassing users. So clearly, hackers are sticking with them if they're still working.
Well, more people are moving to online services. So, major software vendors are no longer supporting long-term or making it very expensive to support on-premise versions of software. So they're forcing people more or less to migrate into their cloud services. So as more and more people are accessing and utilizing those cloud services, the more footprint you have for users to fall susceptible to those kinds of threats.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of prevention, I think at a high level, we all kind of understand that we need to be more aware, more diligent as users in identifying and avoiding phishing scams. And we all know that continued training, simulated phishing exercises are often the most effective way to combat those threats. Outside of training and awareness, can you talk about some of the other methods, policies, tools that can be enabled organizationally to prevent hackers from gaining access to, your network or information?
Yeah, so your best form of prevention here is multi-factor authentication. So even if somebody, you fell susceptible to it, you put in your credentials, they harvested the accounts, you still need that second factor of authentication. Having a good alerting or monitoring tool to detect those kinds of failed authentications would also be another good measure to be able to alert and have a SOC team react, whether it's blocking logins or disabling the account temporarily until you can figure out what is going on, how it was occurring, where it's occurring from, as far as the failed authentications. And specifically around like Azure and Office 365, having good conditional access policies in place. If you're not doing business outside of the US, there should be no reason to allow authentications from outside the United States. So simple measures kind of translate across as you're doing, your policies from your local firewalls, where you're doing geo restriction policies. Those should also equate to your conditional access policies then as you're moving into your authentication sources into Azure.
Perfect. I know we have we have a couple of phishing questions here. I'm going to save them just until the end, until we get a little farther along in this. So let's move on to ransomware. Let me move along here. Obviously another trend that we've been talking about for years, but has continued to evolve over time. So a couple more statistics for folks. From 2021 to 2022, ransomware attacks were only down a very small percentage, interestingly, only about 2.5%. However, there was a 38% decline in payouts from ransomware attacks last year. So we can clearly see from these figures showing less actual payouts that the trend is moving from traditional ransoms where hackers are shutting out access to extortion, where they're actually stealing or exfiltrating the data and using its release as a threat. So to that end, Rick, can you talk about what you're seeing and hearing on this front, and how you're seeing hackers evolving their methodology in the wake of businesses refusing to pay those ransoms?
Yeah, so if you don't pay the ransom, they have no business model and they want to be in business. Ransomware is a very lucrative business practice for these threat actors. So people stopped paying the ransom to get their files back because we've moved on to having better disaster recovery and business continuity plans. We have better backups, we can recover fast. We don't need to pay the ransom. So what else can they do? So before they encrypt your files, they get a copy of them and they store them in and will threaten to release them. Some of the larger threat actors have actual websites. They take the data, they index it, they make it searchable, and they're now targeting through those systems. They will actually email your customers. They'll email regulatory bodies and say, hey, there was a compromise. And you can validate that your information is actually compromised. Log in here, you can search for your name, and your information will come up. And before they, release it publicly, you better tell company XYZ that they should pay the ransom, or we're going to release this publicly. Right now, it's held privately. So they're getting very sophisticated in their business model and their business plans as they're moving from the traditional just pay me the ransom to get your files back. That also introduces a whole nother set of compliance and regulatory issues that come along with that as the data has left your network and it is in the hands of a third party who wasn't authorized to access it. So now you have a whole nother slew of items to think about for just the traditional ransomware. And they're doing a third on top of that. So if you continue to not pay, they're now doing DDoS attacks against your environments as kind of a last resort. So you won't pay to get your files back. You won't pay for us to not release it. We'll just shut you down and we'll do distributed denial of service attacks against you to shut your whole business down as a kind of a last resort to get some more money out of you.
Yeah, clearly trying to evolve their methods, but
Yep.
scary stuff. So, stuff that folks really need to be aware of. The last final topic we wanted to touch on today, which I know was of interest to a lot of folks, is unlike phishing and ransomware, which we've been warding against for years, but sort of a new potential threat, or is it kind of the artificial intelligence ChatGPT wing of things? I don't know about you, but I personally feel like I can't turn my head these days without hearing about it. So the AI-driven learning tools are getting a ton of hype. They're getting a ton of use in business and education in a lot of different contexts. They're also really new and relatively unproven yet in terms of security. So, at this kind of initial learning stage, what is your take on learning tools like ChatGPT? What do we know at this point, and what should users be mindful of when they're exploring these tools?
So very useful tools. Large language model, I won't refer to them as AI because they're not AI in any way, shape, or form. These are just very good at analyzing pre-existing data and outputting it to you. So in that context, they're great for text-based things, writing code, reviewing emails, summarizing things, but they're only as smart as what they know. So ChatGPT 4, for instance, the model that it was trained on, the data existed in 2021. So to make it more useful for people now, you have to either come out with a new version, retrain it, to make it more effective. So at the Microsoft conference this week, Microsoft is I think it's a 41% market share is what they own of OpenAI. So they're doing direct integrations with Office 365, with Windows for these AI-based, we'll say, assistants. So there's value to them, but I would caution you to what information you're going to feed this. So you'll see demos of people dragging emails and having it summarize an email. So a great conceptual use is take this, 5-paragraph email, throw it into a text box and just give me the bullet points of what I need to know from this email. I don't need to read this, just tell me the synopsis. You're also passing all that information to a third party and being mindful of what information you're passing. What information you're requesting and how you word that information. I was reading an article this week of a lawyer that was using ChatGPT to do the background work for a case that they were litigating against. And they were using ChatGPT. It made up 5 fictional cases, very convincing, had evidence, citations to go around it. They filed the brief. These cases don't exist, and they're in a bit of hot water now. So be very careful about what information you're passing to it, and verify any information you get out of it, because they are very convincing about the information that they're passing back to you. So it may not be factual, but it very well looks like it is.
Yeah, the other thing, obviously, you know, you and I've talked about is they've got a big target on their backs now because everyone's talking about it. So, you know, it's going to be something, obviously, we're wary, you know, as a user of providing it with proprietary or personal information, but hackers are also going to be, you know, trying to get in there and get access to that.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are right on time today. I do want to give folks an opportunity if they want to jump in with any questions. We can give folks 1 or 2 minutes here to do so. If you have a question about any of the topics we've covered thus far today, you can submit those in the GoToWebinar questions chat box. And while we give folks a minute or two here, Rick, maybe, you know, pull your crystal ball out for the next few months. What trends do you maybe expect will emerge or evolve, or what should we be keeping an eye out for in the coming months?
So I think your phishing emails are going to get a whole lot more convincing because of things like the large language models. They do a fantastic job of organizing text into natural language. So the traditional, we'll say, language barrier, you know, the historic phishing emails that didn't make sense, had bad punctuation, you know, weird phrasing of words that just don't make sense. Those are slim and very easy to pick out as far as a phishing email. So with these large language model being able to convert text and being able to make a more convincing phishing email. So I really think the phishing is going to get a whole lot worse, and it's going to get a whole lot more convincing before it gets any better.
Yeah. Question here. I know you don't like to refer to ChatGPT as AI, but AI on its own, you know, obviously has a lot of useful applications and benefits. How do you feel AI will affect security tools? I know there's already, you know, components that leverage artificial intelligence and things like that to streamline, to automate. So what's kind of your view there?
So I think there's AI will do a good job at crunching. We'll do a good job at a lot of the low-level detection rules. Most of the newer generation kind of EDR solutions are in some way, shape, or form already leveraging this kind of model of detecting behavioral-based analysis. I see the use or the barrier to entry for threat actors is obviously lowered. You don't really have to know how to program. You can just ask a large language model to write me a piece of code that does this, this, and this, and it'll spit the code out for you. They have a lot of protections in place already where they're trying to stop that. But you can get around those by specifically crafting what you're asking them to do in multiple ways, or kind of obfuscating what you're trying to do and ask it in a different way. So the entry is lower to get into kind of writing the code to make malicious software. So we're going to need AI to combat AI. Is kind of where we're going. The Skynet is coming, right?
Here we go.
But a lot of the remedial tasks I really foresee going to this pattern. So your SOAR, your user behavior analytics will greatly benefit by these large models to learn patterns of behavior and then automate a response to those.
Makes sense. One last quick one. I don't know if you have a view on this, but you know, companies that are obviously wanting to be mindful of not sharing intellectual property or proprietary information, would you advise companies to block tools like ChatGPT or similar websites, or is it sort of a case by case, you know, need to be really mindful of policy?
Um, if you don't want it in your network, block it. You know, I say the same thing. I would equate the same kind of conversation with personal email, web-based email. If you don't want users accessing personal email outside of the context of your controls for your corporate email, block it.
Yeah.
We've had several companies already request that, you know, specifically, you know, block ChatGPT. Well, unfortunately, you're going to block a lot of stuff as more and more integrations are completed for other pieces of software using that. So we used to be able to say block YouTube. Well, now you go to QuickBooks and you click a link in QuickBooks for a tutorial and it's linking to YouTube, and now you've blocked functionality that you actually want. So I think, you know, short term, if you don't want it in your environment, you can put protections in place for it. But long term, I think we'll have to come up with much better solutions to be able to curtail what information is leaving, whether that's deep packet inspection with data loss prevention parameters around those types of things, and kind of rein that in a bit so that we don't need to arbitrarily block everything and stop business, but stop the data exfiltration from your environment.
Makes sense. All right, we've got a couple of others here that are a little bit more specific. So I'm gonna take those offline, and for those folks who we did not address your question specifically, Rick and or myself will absolutely get back to you with an answer so that we can get a little bit deeper on those. But I wanna be respectful of everybody else's time here today as we build this as a short event. So of course, again, this is recorded. You will get a copy of the recording and the presentation slides tomorrow. So if you want to revisit this, if you want to follow up with additional questions, please feel free to do so. Rick always graciously allows me to share his contact information as well. So I'll include that in the follow-up email if you'd like to reach out to him directly. And of course, for our customers, you know, please feel free to follow up with your technical account managers or other account reps with additional questions. I hope folks are following Omega on LinkedIn, which is where we're sharing our latest news, insights, future events. We do hope to hold this threat update on a quarterly basis. I will eat up a little bit more of Rick's time every few months, so hopefully we can do this again towards the end of the summer or early in the fall. And talk about some new emerging and interesting threats. In the meantime, again, keep an eye out in your inboxes for that follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you, Rick, for sharing your insight.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for joining us, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day. Bye, everybody.
Take care.